Welcome to Energy Stew. This is Peter Roth, your host. And I'd like to ask you, when was the last portal you've experienced? What does that mean? Train station? An
Walking from
airport?
my bedroom to the kitchen, there's one in my living room. The building was built on top of an old Abenaki sacred site, I think, which is why so many strange people live here as well. These things are everywhere. I mean, we tend to think of portals as being special, but and they are. They are kind of places where the laws of physics act a little bit different to the way we know them. But they're everywhere. They're a bit like the pressure points on your body, where like Chinese acupuncturists know that quite well. The Earth has exactly the same thing, and some just happen to be more famous than others because our predecessors foresaw that we would need some help in the future, like the 21st century. So they marked them with big buildings like Stonehenge or the Great Pyramid and places like that. And that's what makes them special. They're already on top of a place on the land where the electromagnetic rules bend in a certain way that allows you to have a contact point with another level of reality. So I think that they did this as an insurance policy for us.
Well, let me introduce you because you certainly made it clear who you are and what you're about. And your name is Freddy Silva, and you've written an incredible book called Portals: Energetic Doorways to Mystical Experience Between Worlds. And this book is amazing. I'm fascinated with how much you've built into it, and and about all of these magical, sacred hotspots all around our planet. And actually, there are hotspots out in space that NASA found.
Yeah. It's kind of funny. I remember the PR release when it came out in 2008 because they used the word magnetic portals. I mean, this is NASA we're talking about. And I thought, what are they smoking? And it turns out that they got some nice new shiny toys. And they said, no, we can actually see a lot more of the invisible universe with these new extra sensory materials. So it turns out that every 18 minutes or so, there are these magnetic tubes that pop out of the Earth, and they about 1,000 kilometers above the Earth's atmosphere, they connect with the solar wind, and they create what are called X points. Literally, X marks the spot where there's this interaction of energy, and those tubes go straight to the sun and possibly beyond. And what I thought was funny, and I've had this conversation with NASA engineers before, because they love this kind of mysticism. They just can't talk about it, being engineers and scientists, because they think they'll get underfunded or something by being a bit sort of new agey. But we said, it's funny because back in 8000 BC, the Indian Vedas described exactly the same process using a different language. I mean, they were using the symbol of serpents that move along the ground, that are mirrored in the sky, that are the arrows of sorcerers. It's the same methodology. So, our ancestors were picking up this stuff already before the shiny toys that we spend millions of dollars on. So I thought it was a wonderful moment where science finally meets mysticism and proves what we've known all along.
Well, part of the support of these portals allows us to experience ourselves in these special ways that can identify
Yeah.
movements of energies. And,
And I
and
think that was the reason why they set them up in the first place. Again, the Egyptians made it very clear that if you make an impression on the face of the earth that is human-made, that is an imitation of nature, it will add, and I'm quoting directly, it will act as a magical protector for you in heaven and on earth, unfailingly and regularly and eternally. So they recognize that the incarnation into the human body is a spiritual death. And then we spent the entire of our lives, Gaia television, lectures, podcasts, to find out what it is that we're doing here and the purpose of the soul. And they said, well, we'll make it easy for you, because when you forget that you can do this using various techniques, we're going to mark the place on the face of the earth where these portals exist. And when you walk in, you become somebody else. You become a god, essentially. Nothing to do with an invisible being. A god is essentially a form of nature. It's a spirit found in anything. Even a glass of water has a god. So you go there, you can reconnect with yourself, and you leave your consciousness into another plane for a certain amount of time. And when you come back, you hopefully remember what you've learned. and you apply that in your daily life. So they became self-help centers, these temples. They just help us remember who we are, where we come from. And people think, well, this is probably a bit too much beyond me, but you know what? If I can do it, you can do it too. Because I kind of believed in all this stuff 30 years ago, but I didn't really believe it. I had to experience it to write about it. And if I can do it, it's just like driving a car. You know, you get in behind the wheel for the first time and you're frightened, senseless, but within a couple of weeks, you know exactly where you're going. You know what the pedals do, what the turn switches are doing, and you're in control. And that's what it's all about. It's about discovering who you are, your purpose here, and being in control of your manifestation process.
And you had your earliest experiences in the Andes, right?
Oh, I've had them everywhere, and that's half
Well,
the
I mean, where you got going. Um, I know you've been all over the globe, and it's amazing uh, the opportunities you've had to experience these sacred places um, in endless places. Because like for instance, as you're talking about, we have acupuncture points all over our body. Well, the Earth has them all over these portals, and some of them are very famous, and some of them are very obscure, and you've certainly found a multitude of each.
I know. I'm a bit of an energy junkie in that respect. But again, I like to talk from experience and not just say, yeah, these things are there, they're magical. Yes, they are. But I want to bring the skeptics into the equation as well. Otherwise, you're just preaching to the converted, and that's not that difficult. I want to bring more people into the knowledge so that we can expand our human families so we can develop as a species because we're kind of stuck right now. But I mean, these things are everywhere. And you and I were having this conversation about New York just recently, and how, it'd be fun to have a portal in New York. I can tell you they're everywhere down in Manhattan. And my American friends think I'm crazy to think that Manhattan's anything special. I said, just go walk around the Chrysler Building or Grand Central Station or the Rockefeller Center. Just look at the imagery on the buildings and who built them and what they knew. It tells you exactly where you are and the places that you're attracted to. I mean, beauty is a bait that gets you there. And there's one place I absolutely adore, and it's in Central Park. It's a big boulder. It has all of these scratchings on it made by the glaciers. So basically it's a glacial erratic, and you can see where the glaciers carved stones on top of this boulder, and it kind of overlooks downtown Manhattan. It's covered by these trees, and you just get pulled there for no reason. You don't have to be a geologist. And I just sat there for the first time, and I'm aware with the fairies, and that's exactly what it is. That boulder just happens to be marking one of those, hotspots of telluric current. And people are going down to the park and walking around, and I'm just quite happy sitting on this little sort of glacial rock and having a lovely time. It's better than drugs, I can guarantee it.
Well, the whole spiritual experience can be better than drugs if you're in the right spot.
Oh yeah, drugs just get in the way.
Well, I agree that we can be transported. I mean, a lot of it is, I mean, it's endless the possibilities of what our multidimensional selves can do in the right sacred hotspots.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
yeah,
I mean, these places are like a mirror of who you are. I mean, we're made of electromagnetism. That's essentially what the human body is all about. You're walking into another fine point of electromagnetic current, and if the two basically overlap, if there's a meeting of minds, a bit like going to the right music store and listening to the right kind of music that makes you feel happier, then there's an interchange of information. And I mean, the Hopi had a wonderful phrase for all of this. They call these places the spots of the fawn, and it's part of their creation myth. How in the beginning the creator makes human beings, sends one to the South Pole, not the North Pole, sends to the South Pole, which is very interesting.
mm,
And with the drum, as you do when you go to the South Pole, and this person starts hearing the heartbeat of the Earth Mother, and he starts beating the drum. And when there's a sympathetic resonance between the two, the Earth sends these shoots of energy to the surface, and the Earth becomes abundant with energy. But they said there are some places on the face of the Earth that are more abundant than others, and those are the spots of the fawn. And that's what became the PowerPoints, the portals of the planet. And that's what they used today in New Mexico and Arizona, the Hopi, the Navajo, and before them, the Anasazi. They would go to these places where they knew that they could sense something was different, and it became their a rite of initiation, and the places where shaman would go. And eventually they would mark them with kivas because they didn't really build anything. They knew where these places were and still do because they can sense the land. They're so close to it. They're not so encumbered as we are with cell phones and social media and all these other distractions that get you nowhere. So they sensed it, but they figured that for those who are losing the plot, we'll build the kiva. And if you go into one of the kivas in Bandelier National Monument, there's a little fire pit, which everybody takes pictures, and then everybody forgets about the little hole next to the portal is. It's called the Sipapu reed, and they said that at certain times, under the right conditions, there's a reed talking about NASA, a magnetic reed that connects to the sky, and it allows the shaman soul to leave the body, go into the other world, and at the same time, it allows the other world to bring in information into the kiva. So it's a two-way exchange of information. So it's important to sort of have your antenna out to these places, and if they're not been marked, just walk around quietly and your body will know what it needs for its highest state of elevation. And you'll find yourself walking into a park or a coffee shop for no reason because some of those people had exactly the same feel. There's a woman here where I live in Portland in Maine. She said, and we're good friends and she knows what I do. And I said, it's funny that you chose this particular building out of all the others in the area because there's something very amazing about it. Not just the fact that the coffee is really good, and she says, yeah, I just got that sort of feel that there was something about the building. And we actually doused the building and found out that there's an actual portal under the building. So
Oh,
she
wow.
already knew. She already knew because she's so intuitive about it. And that's why people like going there and not the other coffee shop across the street. So I said, yeah, it pays attention to follow your gut feeling because that's why it's there. Your body knows what it needs for its highest good. So when you know what to do, don't think about it. Just the be like Yoda. Don't think, do, and let the body guide you. And before you know it, you're away with the fairies.
Well, I'm thinking of the future as humanity becomes much more spiritually um, inclined. We'll be so much more interested and tuned into these portals all over the place, and be able to make the most of our planet that way.
Exactly. I mean, it used to be that way anyway, and I think it goes in waves depending on the political whim of the day. I mean, we used to cover the earth with tens of thousands of these places, and they were built in a way that they're going to survive anything. I mean, when you're using 100-ton to 1,000-ton rocks, this is done very deliberately for future generations. And then by the time we get to Europe, we have the Catholic Church literally wiping everything out. And what they didn't wipe out, they would build their churches on top of the old temples because they knew there was something there. They didn't know what it was because this was, a tightly kept secret. I mean, using energy, manipulating energy is a great responsibility. And the people that were taking care of these portals, they knew what was going on. And they said, no, we're not going to share this with anybody unless you have integrity. So the church would build its buildings on top of the old sites, and of course, people would know where to go. That was the whole point. So the stonemasons stepped in and they said, "Well, this is what we're going to do. We're going to put symbols within the buildings to let you know exactly where the energy hotspots are." And those were the figures of the green man. The image of the individual with foliage coming out of his mouth and his nostrils and everything. It shows that there's an abundance there at that particular spot, and it might be a pillar, a door, an altar. That's why we call the altar the altar. It alters you. And the entrance, the entrance, that's where the energy goes through, you see. And when the church finally cottoned on to this is the symbol to tell people this is what's going on in the building, they outlawed the green man, and the stonemasons decided to put dragons and serpents in certain strategic points of the buildings. So there's a bit of a joke going on in Europe. If you ever go there, look for the sign of the green man or the dragon, and you go and stand there, and it's like being in an old sacred site.
Wow. It's so wonderful to hear you from your experience of all over the world of traveling and finding these opportunities that people overlook. But you're
Someone's got to
doing,
do
yeah, great. So I was part of your book, you talk about aliens visiting the Mayans, and that's
God, yes.
I I once did a past life regression back into a lifetime, a Mayan lifetime, and I was in a healing chamber in a little um, building, very small building, like a single room. And while I was there, I noticed overhead there was a UFO.
Ah,
And this is way back in an ancient past lifetime. So when I read that in your book, I went, yeah, that sounds right.
yeah, the native people have a lot of great stories, and especially all the way down North and Central America. And I think these people tend to be attracted to those who have an open door policy. And the native people always said that, space brothers are always welcome. They're kind of just like us. They just happen to be a bit more advanced because they know how to fly from A to B like that.
That's right.
And, we respect them and they respect us. It's not about worship. It's about that respect. And the story in Palenque was very funny because the night watchman was sitting there on the pyramid, I know very well. And he said, it's kind of funny because, you're sitting here looking for people trying to break in the middle of the night. And I had my little box of food to keep me happy during the middle of the night. And then suddenly there's a sort of light that just appears, breaks into a couple, and then it reappears in the central plaza. And it's like watching a movie, and you think, what the hell is going on? And you can see in his eyes, there's a bit of fear in there, and you can't fake that. And he says, yeah, these humanoids just popped out and they walked over the pyramid, not the one that you think. And I said, yeah, I know. It's Pyramid 4, isn't it? I said, how do you know? Because that's where the portal is. Everybody goes to that one over there, but they don't know because it's like the big one. Everybody wants the big picture of the big pyramid. I said, that's not the point. It's usually the smaller things that don't get your attention. That's where the good stuff is. And I said, I always had a feel for Pyramid 4. I said, where? And it's like these people just literally walk into the building as though it wasn't even there. So I figured I better go down and see if I'm imagining in this or if it's real. So he gets down to the turf, and he said the last thing I remember is two people coming out of the building, looking at me, and then I woke up in my bed about 40 miles away being hit. This is the funny part of the story. My wife was hitting me because she thought that I got home early because I'd been fired from my job. And how the hell were we going to feed the kids for the rest of the week with only two jobs? And I thought, you can't fake this. You really cannot fake this. The guy was being beaten black and blue by his wife for, having been transported from his place of work back to his bedroom.
I
That
love
was
that.
brilliant.
That's wonderful. But there are all these known sacred sites that we are more familiar with. But then there are incredible places. For instance, in Ohio, there's a
Yeah.
place that you know about and write about in the book. And
Yeah, the Serpent Mound is always a wonderful draw and has a great history that nobody knows about, or few people do, unless you're a Cherokee. Because in their tradition, they said that, when we were walking across the plains, we finally got to Appalachia and the Ohio area. And they said that we bumped into this race of tall giants. They're about 8 feet tall. And we have the bones buried all over Britain and France in the
and
giants'
even in the Midwest, there are
and the
skeletons of
Midwest.
giants.
A lot of the mounds, exactly. And especially around West Virginia, which I always said to be the most mystical part of America. And my American friends just laugh at me when I say that. I said, yeah, you just wait. So they were in West Virginia and they said, yeah, we bumped into this race of people that had survived a catastrophic flood about, 11,000 years ago. And I went, okay, I'm with you so far. The land sank in the Atlantic and they moved here and they were covered with red hair. They couldn't breed with humans because obviously the women would give birth to infants and they died during childbirth. So they had to interbreed and they ran out of space. And they got up, they were just tired of living basically. And they said, yeah, and to memorize and commemorate their traditions, we incorporated them into our Cherokee traditions. And that we even named the river Allegheny going through Pittsburgh. And I always said Pittsburgh is one of the most important parts of American history. And people just laugh at me. And I thought, fine, I'm happy. But it is very much true. It was they who created Serpent Mound. And the Cherokees said, we just mowed the lawn. That's it. We just took care of the mound. It was already there. But the funny thing is, the first time I went there, I wasn't getting that sort of tingly wingly. when you're walking the serpent or around the coil, because you don't want to be on the serpent itself. It's already pretty worn out as it is. So I walked around the coils and I couldn't get that sort of feel of energy. And I thought, I wasn't expecting that. Okay. And I got towards the egg, the big section that looks like there's a mouth, and there's a big sort of elliptical area. And that's where the hit comes in. And I thought, oh, here we are. And suddenly it's like you're in this veil between worlds, and I'm being shown like an image in front of me, all the sacred sites around Serpent Mound. And I had no idea about this, and little did anybody else know at the time. There are 8 sites that form a big Celtic wheel of sites around Serpent Mound. And I told the people with me, I said, there's a site that's very important on the northeast quadrant, down the river, over the stream, over into the woods there. That's where the spirit keepers used to hang out. And there's a couple of archaeologists there. And I said, how the hell do you know that? We haven't made that public yet. I said, what do you mean? Well, it's absolutely true. There's a major site there. So, yeah, and the best part is there's a cave under this egg, and that's where they used to do their out-of-body work. There's a portal under here. And they looked at me again, and it's like, how do you know this? Because they're showing me. And so we went down the cliff, and sure enough, there's the remains of a cave entrance, and it's now collapsed because there's a lot of sediment and a lot of earthquakes that have happened. But they said, yeah, there is a cave that goes in there, and technically it keeps going right under the actual egg. And I thought, bunga, that's the exact reason why you go to these places, to extract information. But it depends on what you're taking there. So my experience is different for other people because my job is to teach this. So I have to, that's my idea, is to go there and say, what is this place all about? And what is the story? And then it comes back to me in that particular way. Other people go to these places for other reasons.
So tell us about the nature of your pineal gland.
The nature of the pineal gland.
Yours, I mean, your particular pineal.
Oh, it's just the same as everybody else's. It's the funny thing about the pineal is that there's a lot of science behind it, actually. And the fact is that when you go into a place, again, a portal or any hotspot of energy where the frequencies are such. So let's say, for example, you're in Malta at the Hypogeum, and you go into this one of 33 underground rooms, which is very special. And it's acoustically designed to get you into leave your body. It's actually been proven. And the frequency is such that it starts to spin your pineal gland. And when that happens, it acts like a little cobra. It rises up, just like the cobra on the pharaoh's brow in Egypt, by the way. And there's a story behind that. So the pineal rises up and it starts vibrating like the tongue of a cobra. And when it does that, it starts connecting the 2 hemispheres of the brain. So when those 2 hemispheres connect, you're creating an electrical charge because of the chemical compounds that make up the brain. It's like a positive and negative charge. And that's what gets you to have an expanded consciousness. So there's a natural truth to the vibration of the pineal gland that it's taken us until what, the 21st century to work that one out.
Yeah, and it has special chemistry in it also. There's something called black melanin in it.
That's right. And the creation of DMT, which of course releases those wonderful endorphins that get you to have these incredible visionary states. But under the right conditions, the visions are real. They'll become a sort of an interceptor between worlds. So it's not just your brain making up the imagery, it's the fact that the chemical is there to induce a kind of transformer that allows you to understand what is being said from another reality into English or German or French, because they don't speak our language. They have to use the chemistry in our brain to create that kind of translating device. And that's why it's so funny that people will say, well, psychics, when they speak in English and they convert information in English, well, aliens don't speak English. I said, no, you're right. They don't speak any language. They speak their own language. But to connect, we need the chemistry that creates a translating device for us to understand what they're saying. And I've always said that beware of any psychic information that is written in pure English, because that's not coming from somewhere else. Real psychic information has a bad syntax because, yeah, the translation is not that perfect. There's always breaks in the syntax.
Well, yeah, our own brains translate other languages into what our minds can understand.
Exactly.
And so when we work telepathically with people from other places, they're speaking their language, but they're sending the meaning of their language to our brain, and our brain and uses our own language.
Exactly. And the images as well. I mean, for example, I mean, there's one time when I was learning this stuff years ago, I was taken to a mound that used to be a sacred mound in Ireland. It gets transformed into a Catholic churchyard. So we went there to work with, dead people, energy, invisible things, just to get a sense of what things feel like. And there was this little creature at the end that was holding onto my finger when my arms were down by my sides at the end of this meditation, and I kind of pulled it up. It made a huge fuss, so I put it back down again. And it looked like this sort of onion head with a big belly with little spindly legs. I still remember him today, very proud. And I said, it's funny because what we're seeing here, or at least what I could see and two other people could see, because we're laughing at this. The rest of the group was saying, what are you looking at? I said, can't you
Right.
see this guy? But the thing is, it presents itself in a way that's acceptable to the local culture. Now, if that had happened to me in Persia, it would look like a jinn, a local nature spirit with completely different facial features because it's acceptable to that culture. Otherwise, it'll
Right.
freak you out if you saw what these things really look like. Not because they're demonic or anything. It's just that we have no physical experience of what these things look like in our dimension. So it would freak us out. So they
Right.
make it easier for us to understand and be much more sort of attached to it. But I have to admit, I do prefer the fairies. They're much more interesting.
Well, this is fascinating about consciousness. Maybe another time you and I can talk about how we can use our consciousness in much more expansive ways and interesting ways, as you are obviously having these great experiences.
Oh, I'm doing my best. I'm still learning after 30 years.
Well, it's endless. It's,
I
uh,
hope I never become an expert because then I stop learning. It's like, oh, you're an expert. No, don't call me that. I don't want to stop learning. Otherwise, you become complacent and then you get mired in hubris, which is the worst thing possible.
it's all relative. There's no absolute. So your book is called Portals, Energetic Doorways to Magical Experience Between Worlds. And, this is fascinating talking with you. And I'm so happy that
No,
you
thanks, Peter.
joined me today. And I hope we can talk again about, um, I want to find out more of the magic that you live with and work with.
Oh, twist my arm.
Okay, good. So Freddy Silva, how can people reach you?
You can reach me at invisibletemple.com.
Invisibletemple.com. That's great. Freddie, thanks so much for being a guest on Energy Stew. I enjoyed talking with
Thanks,
you
Peter.
greatly.
My love to New York and everywhere else.
Thank you. And this is Peter Roth, your host of Energy Stew at prn.live. I can be reached at Peter at Heart River, HEART river.org. I'd love to hear from you, and thanks so much for listening.